Again, there was no music, but I think we're live. Welcome to Uphold. We have with us today Hugo Philion, the CEO and founder of Flair Networks. Welcome, Hugo.
Hey, great to meet you.
Where are you calling in from? Are you in the UK?
No, I'm in Dubai,
You're in Dubai. Okay, you're
the
not
world
close.
center of crypto.
And of much else. I was just there for the Algorand and then for another conference. Everything's happening in Dubai. They don't have to worry so much about regulation and stuff. We've just integrated, I think, or we're in the process of integrating Flair. We have a good relationship with Flair. How did this all start? How did you get the idea for Flair Networks?
So I heard an interesting kind of anecdote the other day that before the internet, you could make a pretty good pizza, and you could serve your local area. And someone could make a pizza that is 150 times better than your pizza, but they could still only serve the local area. Well, in the digital age, if you make the best product possible, you actually get to serve everyone because your delivery cost is close to zero. And really, with Flair, we got together as, I guess, a small group of like-minded individuals who met principally at UCL. So 3 co-founders, myself, Dr. Nairiusha, and Sean Rowan, got together, sort of having sort of met at UCL, really just with the idea of let's research this space. Sean had already worked on a kind of Bitcoin-like blockchain for intra-vehicle communications. And when we started researching this space, we thought that there were some things that we could do better. Our first foray was into a consensus protocol, of which we released the white paper for that back, I think, in 2018. And Flair really exists to do a couple of things. First of all, interoperability in blockchain is very poor. The interoperability models we have today, the ones that do exist are very, to be honest with you, they're really not necessarily safe, and that even if you assume they're safe, they're extremely capital inefficient. So we want to do better there. And then most importantly is the data available to dApp developers on chain is very, very limited. And the oracles that deliver that data are fairly, really, to be honest with you, extremely centralized broadly, especially the popular ones. And they're incredibly hard to extend. You have to lobby some group to get new information. So there has to be a better model of interoperability, and there has to be a better model of making an oracle decentralized and extendable. And that's essentially what we're trying to achieve with Flair. So Flair, if you really want to think about it, is a layer 1 EVM blockchain. So you can build smart contracts on it using the most popular smart contract language, that is Solidity. But that's not it. It's not just a copy-paste EVM chain. We internally call Flair the blockchain for data. And it has 2 protocols. One is called the Flair time series oracle. That delivers prices or time series data. Could be carbon emissions, could be any index, could be inflation index, could be housing index, could be whatever index you want that to be, anything that moves over time. And the second protocol is called the state connector. And it allows the chain to essentially grab data from 2 different sources. The first is other blockchains, so state data from other blockchains. And then the second is Web2 data. And really that's kind of what Flair brings. Smart contracts with full data, which means you can build on Flair as a really rich smart contract platform in a way that is massively less restricted than before. Or you can build using Flair to create the interoperability protocols.
If I may, I want to put you on the spot here and try to put interoperability in context. We have a number of solutions. We have Axelar, we have the layer 0 of Constellation, we have Quant, we have different approaches to interoperability. In one way, do you think yours is superior or more useful?
Without wishing to, I guess,
let's talk about the tech, not about the projects. I know this is always sensitive.
No.
Explain in technical terms how your approach differs.
So in technical terms, so we have 2 protocols, the FTSO and the state connector. The FTSO is an oracle. Okay, so the state connector allows for proofs of state from another blockchain to be essentially proven onto Flair by the validators of the network. So far, so similar to Axelar. Not that interesting, right? Only the problem when you get to a proof of stake network that is trying to handle cross-chain data is that you end up either having to have a huge amount of stake, 3x the stake you're securing. Specifically, that's the Byzantine fault tolerant kind of level, or you have to, or you're unsafe. So you have to have this very large amount of stake, or you're unsafe. That isn't a tolerable situation to be in, because cross-chain, and so that's the model that everyone's using, right? Just to be very clear, that's the model at least that Axelar is using, and we think we can do better than that. So the state connector allows for data to come to Flair, for the nodes to come to consensus over it, and if the majority, so the majority of the stake, say that some data that has been put onto the blockchain, and they say it's true, but it is in fact false, we have what's known as a binary forking mechanism, which allows any node essentially to drop out of consensus and form a new network. And so this is the idea that really we had, that comes from the idea that if a developer changed the Bitcoin core code tomorrow, no one would accept that as Bitcoin. And this is the same idea as having a secondary mechanism to protect against a malicious proof of stake set. You don't want this to happen often. It's not a desirable thing for there to be a fork, but it's most important that, so we take inspiration from two things. The idea that if someone changed the core code of Bitcoin and everyone downloaded that tomorrow, that no one would accept that as Bitcoin. And then the second thing is from FBA, the idea of each validator running proactive security, essentially contributing to consensus in the FBA manner, which is if you're a large user of the network, you should run a node, and you should run what we call a local attestation provider. And when this local attestation provider is out of sync, essentially doesn't agree with the main set, it will fork from the network. Most importantly, any node that doesn't agree with the main set will fork to the same version of the network. So they're not forking to n different versions, they're forking to a single different version.
You're creating what we called in finance a bad bank, right?
Exactly. But most importantly, all of those counterparties who are doing business off-chain, so on the other chains, they're all running their own nodes. And they're only going to make a transaction that relates to Flair on another chain if they are also proactively securing their node and that their node is in agreement with the main set. And so this is kind of the concept of how Flair derives what we call, I guess, financially invariant security.
Financially invariant security. How is that specifically different from an Oracle solution? I mean, we don't have to go through the problems that oracles have. We all know that things like the chain link is horrendously centralized. But what else is different with your approach from the Oracle?
So the state connector you can think of as a deterministic oracle. It's an oracle for deterministic data, right? It's being run by the validators of the network, or it will be being run by the validators of the network primarily. So firstly, it's secured by a very large amount of proof of stake, and it's more decentralized. So that's important. Secondly, it has the forking mechanism. But let's focus on the Flair time series oracle, which is slightly different. Again, over the long term, that will be run by the validators of the network. So essentially, people delegate and stake to FTSOs, what we call Flair time series oracles, and they each put a price in. We currently have 100. Of those FTSOs. They each put a price into the network for a particular data series. From those prices, a distribution is formed, the tails are chopped off, and the median is given. Now that is essentially broadly a proof of stake based system, but it's using the native token as the staking token. So the whole blockchain is dedicated towards grabbing data. Whereas if you build an oracle on top of a blockchain and then issue a secondary token, you obviously are not going to reach the same value as the L1, and so you don't have the same amount of essentially value at stake securing the network, securing that data.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the time series oracle. Why? I'm not fully getting that. Why is this time series oracle so important here?
Well, you need prices.
Sorry?
For almost all of DeFi, you need prices.
Yeah.
And if you have prices on a blockchain and you want them to be fair, you want them to be centralized. Essentially, we didn't like the way oracles were structured. We wanted to create a superior oracle. We took inspiration from the original Ethereum community paper on shelling coin. We think we've got a little further than shelling coin.
Are you familiar at all with directed acyclic graphs?
Yep.
So
not me personally, but
yeah,
the team is.
But it sounds a bit like a state connector. Sounds a bit like a state channel. The idea of observing data reputation at the point of this is would be getting too technical. Which let's try to keep this.
No. State channels are very different. They're between two counterparties, right? Broadly, a state channel isn't necessarily bringing all that data on chain. Usually it's to replay some, if I understand state channels correctly, it's broadly between a fixed set of participants who all replay the data. That was my recollection. I remember there being a chess game about it.
It is, because it is about the reputation of the data provider.
Exactly.
I want to focus on Flair. So when did you start this? You said in 2018.
So we got together in 2017, but really Flair as an idea came together really in 2018, 2019.
How has the journey been so far? Why do we only now hear about it? How did you develop the whole thing? Where's the team? How are you organized?
We started out really as 3 people researching stuff and thinking about what to do. We went into consensus. We essentially formed a consensus protocol called the Flair Consensus Protocol. It is in fact a graph-based protocol. And then we kind of thought, well, where can we add value in this space? Like, really, what do people need? And the first thing we thought about was essentially interoperability. At the time, you had all these networks like Bitcoin, XRP, Litecoin, all these monetary networks that don't have smart contracts. Clear to me that the future of blockchain, clear to us at the time, and I think most people, that the future of blockchain is smart contracts, the ability to do more than just transfer a token between 2 parties. Sure, Bitcoin is the OG and is incredibly valuable and useful, but all of the development, most of the development in this space is happening in the smart contract networks. So we thought, well, how can we bring these networks to a smart contract network? How can we bring the value of these networks to a smart contract network? And really, that's how we got to Flair.
Do you have where are you now? So what's coming on in the near future for Flair? What should our users be aware of?
So we never talk about what's happening in the future.
Very prudent. I never make predictions about the future myself, but you need a direction that you're moving towards. Are you, for example, getting into the NFT space?
So we absolutely cannot talk about things we may or may not do in the future. Just let me be very clear there.
But you had an NFT trigger demo thingy.
Absolutely.
You told me about it.
So that we can talk about, because it's live functionality. It exists on the network. Anyone could use it today. So the NFT demo was quite cool. So it was the first little taste of what the State Connector does. So essentially what that demo showed was the purchase of an NFT on our canary network called Songbird, which is on Uphold. Mm-hmm. So purchase of an NFT directly with XRP and directly with Dogecoin. So making a transaction on the XRP ledger, making a transaction on the Doge network, triggering a smart contract, which delivers the NFT to the person that made the transaction on the other network.
Oh,
yeah,
that's quite fascinating. Is that something you're developing now? Is that
it's something that's built?
No,
something that's built.
Are NFTs a focus for you, even without
NFTs? NFTs are definitely a focus. We have a number of marketplaces. I believe that the marketplaces I've spoken to will be integrating that functionality. It makes it the first really. So at the moment, if you look at NFTs broadly, the bulk of NFTs, they're restricted to the chain's currency that they're issued in.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. They're restricted to the chain's currency that they're issued in. I'm right. So 90%, I would wager 95 to 99% of the value, I would say today in NFTs is probably in Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
So if Ethereum acts as the US dollar to this commodity that we call the NFT, right? And we think that people should be able to buy an NFT in an arbitrary currency, right? They shouldn't have to work with the global default currency of Ethereum in order to buy a quality NFT, right? And so what this demo does, and what Flair offers to NFT issuers and artists, is the ability to essentially maximize their market, right? Because they can take a payment for an NFT in any currency. That means they don't have to just rely on one ecosystem. They can rely on the users from all of the ecosystems. And I mean, we've just seen ordinals start taking off on Bitcoin. Clearly, there is demand for NFTs outside of, Ethereum. And we think that by giving people the ability to buy and trade NFTs in essentially any token, any currency from a network that is connected via the state connected to Flair is an incredibly useful thing to do for the industry.
But you're not building specifically an NFT marketplace then?
There are already marketplaces on Flair.
There are already, I'm sorry for my ignorance. Yeah. There are already marketplaces on Flair. How do I participate efficiently in the Flair network? What do I need to do?
So we have a token, and it's called Flair. As a token holder, you have some, I suppose you call it rights and obligations. So your rights are to, at the moment, wrap the token in order to delegate to an oracle, so an FTSO. That gives you a share of their reward, usually between 80 and 90% of the rewards they earn on the delegation of your money. And then the second aspect is a vote recently passed called FIP01 that changes the way that the token is distributed. So originally we had a set of participants that were going to receive all of the tokens that are being distributed to the public. That set received 15% at day one. There's then 85% left to be distributed over 36 months in equal installments. And what FIP01 did is it said, okay, thank you for starting the network. That is excellent. But now we need to broaden the network because the network's ambitions have massively evolved from where it was. And in order to earn that remaining 85% or a portion of it, you need to wrap your token. So if you turn Flair into wrapped Flair, which is the token that you use to delegate to the FTSO, that allows you will get automatically, you will be able to claim monthly a portion of that 36-month distribution. And so what that does is it means the original recipients can still get their distribution if they want to, but it also allows new incoming participants to accumulate a position if they want to, and to earn that reward.
I'm just getting comments here in the chat that your explanation is very elucidating, very good explanation.
Good.
I was wondering if there was another aspect of the Flair network that you have trouble communicating, or that you want to communicate to a larger audience? Maybe some
I think
misconceptions about Flair. Or...
Yeah, I think we have I guess we always have a dichotomy in how do we communicate what we're doing, because we're both an L1, but we're also an interoperability network. And kind of no one's done this before. People do an L1 or they do an interoperability network. So you look at Axelar, it's an interoperability network. You look at Layer 0, it's an interoperability network. We're an L1 with the L1 for data. You can use data on Flair. You don't have to care about any other blockchain, but you can also use Flair together with interoperability protocols that can be built using Flair to use tokens from other chains, or purely to secure an interoperability protocol that is secured by Flair. And I'll tell you why it can be secured by Flair. This is a really nice aspect of what we're doing. Build your smart contracts on Flair. Let's say those smart contracts are securing relay nodes, like Axelar. Stake to those relay nodes. Cool. So you've moved, you're moving data across different chains. One of those relay nodes becomes malicious or doesn't deliver the data. So they either have a liveness problem or they're malicious. What do? Well, on a traditional network, say an overlay network, you have to form a governance committee to slash them, because there's no method to slash that relay node, no real method to slash that relay node. With the state connector, you can prove that the data received on chain A is not the data that went to chain B, or data didn't go to chain B. And you can prove that directly using the state connector, which means you can slash without a governance committee. And this is a really nice example of how you can build using Flair to create an interoperability protocol that doesn't need to touch Flair other than being administered on Flair and generating transactions on Flair when there are slashing events. So Flair's both a layer 1 and it's a substrate for building interoperability protocols.
Is there any limit to the data sources you can access? Can you access Web2 legacy data sources? Is that all included?
If it's open, we can access it. If it's open and it's not completely nonsense data, i.e. it's not being completely updated and delivered or deleted every couple of seconds. So if we call that Web2 data, let's call it a tweet. And let's say that tweet exists for at least some period of time. We can prove, if you write a tweet and you put it up and you say, I'd like you to prove that I put this tweet or on Twitter, and you don't immediately delete it, we can at least prove that at some point in time that tweet existed. And then let's say that tweet is part of a marketing campaign and there's a smart contract that has been set up to reward that marketing campaign. You can receive a micropayment against that.
Sorry, I'm just processing this. Yeah.
I see in the chat some people are asking about governance.
Please, you see the chat too. Please just answer what you see.
So absolutely. So governance is a key part of Flair. It's one of the things I should have mentioned about being a token holder. Obviously, we have governance both on Flair and on Songbird. So we have on Songbird 2 governance systems, one called Songbird testing proposals. This is for things that will come to Flair, and another one specifically for Songbird. And if you're a Songbird holder, you can participate in those. On Flair, we have Flair improvement proposals. And there's 2 ways a Flair improvement proposal can be initiated. Firstly, by the foundation. That's the first way. And the second, once Flair is out of beta. So Flair is currently in what we call beta stage. Once Flair is out of beta, the community will be able to make proposals on Songbird, stake to those proposals. The winning proposal will then be passed up to Flair for a vote.
Can we speak about practical use cases? Are there any you can talk about? There's a question here about small and medium enterprises and banks and
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, practical use cases. So first practical use case, creating a relay for the FTSO data to provide that to other chains as an Oracle service. And one of the people already building on Flair has shown an interest in building that. So essentially monetizing the FTSO through relaying that data to other chains and charging for it. That to me is an example of how do you build an interoperability protocol using Flair? Cool. So Flair gets the data, relayed to other chains, acts as an alternative oracle on those other chains. And there are plenty of chains that don't have great oracles. So, that's a really interesting area for us. So that's a concrete use case. We've also put out two, I guess, we've put out papers on two bridging protocols. The first for bridging non-smart contract tokens, such as XRP and Bitcoin, and the second for bridging smart contract tokens. The second one is called Layer Cake. The first one is called F Assets. Those are things that can be built on Flair. Very concrete use cases. When it comes to Web 2 data, it's very early days. I use the example of monetizing a tweet on Twitter. Can also probably very good for things like identity, very good for proving who won a game on Web 2, very good for potentially accessing databases and giving answers on chain so that people can access things like KYC or whatever. Those kind of things. Need to go a stage further to make it even more valuable, is to add privacy to that. So essentially something can be proven onto the chain without exposing the underlying data.
The parallels to a graph, did you say that the Flair concept was based on a graph model?
No, the Flair consensus protocol is
the consensus protocol, because it sounds all very, very much in this direction. We have one more question about Web3 applications on the Flair network. Is anyone building anything you can share?
We're able to build Web3 applications on Flair is a Web3 property, and it integrates to EVM. So yes,
you should be able to build lots of things on it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything else left to share with the community? Anything they're waiting for? Big announcements, big milestones coming that you can share?
Well, there's two governance things, I think, in progress. No, one at the moment, we have one passed the other day. So currently the FTSO is a governance vote passed for the FTSO to introduce a band around the median such that more FTSOs get rewarded. At the moment, the rewards are quite skewed to the center of the set, as would be expected. But there's a band going around that is essentially allows more FTSOs to get rewarded and therefore distributes the earnings better to make the set more decentralized. Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Where do you see Flair in 5 years? Where do you see crypto in 5 years? We don't need to talk about Flair. Where are we going? The last year has been a disaster. Now we've got a new onslaught against staking, and God knows what the Americans are planning. Where do you see this whole thing going?
People who bet against new technologies seem to fail. Like, I don't think there's any great. I don't think there's any really great examples of them winning. So I think that's my answer on crypto.
Wonderful. Flair, I love that. It's a wonderful answer. People betting against new technologies usually on the wrong side of history. Yes.
Yeah. Flair, we hope to make an impact. We hope to make the use of blockchain better for everyone. Bridging sucks, and but we're going to have bridging, right? It's a core part of what we have to do in this industry, and so we have to have great bridging, and Flair will be part of that.
We should do a separate webinars. Are bridges necessary? I have a completely different opinion, but that is for another day and another topic. Thank you so much, Hugo, for joining us today here.
My pleasure.
Have the best of times in Dubai. I'm going to be there soon again this year.
Well, let me know.
I will. Greetings from London, from the team at Uphold. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye-bye.